Captain Jin-Ho Park was in the middle of his morning coffee when the alarms went off. Red lights flashed across the International Space Defense Coalition headquarters. Jin-Ho nearly spilled his drink as he rushed to the command center. "Status report," he shouted as he entered the room. "Sir, an unknown vessel just appeared in Earth's orbit," said Officer Han, her eyes fixed on the screen. "It came out of nowhere. Our sensors didn't detect any approach." Jin-Ho stared at the main display. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was silver with blue lights running along its smooth hull. There were no visible engines or weapons. It simply hung in space, waiting. "Any communication attempts?" Jin-Ho asked. "Nothing yet, sir," Officer Han replied. "But they're not jamming us either." Jin-Ho straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. "Open a channel. All frequencies." The communications officer nodded and pressed a series of buttons. "Channel open, sir." Jin-Ho cleared his throat. "This is Captain Jin-Ho Park of the International Space Defense Coalition. You have entered Earth's orbit without permission. Please identify yourself and state your purpose." For several long seconds, there was only silence. Then a voice replied. It was smooth and clear, speaking perfect English. "Greetings, Captain Jin-Ho Park. I am Ambassador Rion of the Terry. We come in peace and with great urgency. We request a meeting with your leaders." Jin-Ho exchanged looks with his officers. First contact with an alien civilization was something they had trained for, but nothing could truly prepare them for the real thing. "Ambassador Rion, we will need time to contact our governments and arrange a meeting. May I ask why you have come to Earth?" There was a pause before the ambassador replied. "We need your help, Captain. My people are facing extinction." Within 6 hours, leaders from major nations had gathered at the coalition headquarters. Security was tight, with military personnel stationed at every entrance. News of the alien arrival had not yet been shared with the public. Jin-Ho stood near the conference room door, watching as President Han of the Pacific Alliance took her seat at the head of the table. The other world leaders looked nervous, whispering among themselves. "They're ready for the ambassador," Jin-Ho said into his earpiece. A few minutes later, 2 figures entered the room. One was human. Dr. Subin Kim, Earth's top xenobiologist who had been the first scientist to board the alien vessel. Beside her walked a being that made everyone in the room fall silent. Ambassador Ruan stood about 7 feet tall. His skin was a metallic silver blue that seemed to shimmer under the lights. He had 4 arms, each ending in 7-fingered hands. His face was almost human-like, with 2 large, deep purple eyes that blinked sideways. "Thank you for meeting with me," Ruan said, his voice coming from a small device on his chest. "My people are grateful." President Han nodded stiffly. "Please, Ambassador, tell us why you've come to Earth." Ruan moved to the center of the room. "My civilization, the Terry, has existed for over 10,000 of your Earth years. We have colonized hundreds of worlds across 3 galaxies. Our technology is considerably advanced compared to yours." Jin-Ho noticed some leaders shift uncomfortably at this statement. "Yet despite our advancement," Ruan continued, "we face an enemy we cannot defeat. We call them the Void Eaters." With a wave of his hand, Rion activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a massive fleet of Terry ships firing at what looked like moving tears in space. Dark, rippling holes that seemed to swallow light itself. The Void Eaters consume everything: energy, matter, even the fabric of space-time. They appeared at the edge of our territory 50 years ago. Since then, we have lost 37 colony worlds and 2 billion lives. The room was completely silent now. The hologram changed to show a beautiful planet with crystal cities, then the same planet dark and lifeless. Our weapons harm them, but they adapt quickly. Our scientists develop new defenses, but the Void Eaters evolve faster. They learn from every encounter. President Han leaned forward. "Ambassador, While we sympathize with your situation, I don't understand why you've come to us. You said yourself that your technology is far more advanced than ours. What could we possibly offer? Ryun looked around the room, his purple eyes settling on Jin-Ho for a moment before returning to President Han. Hope, he said simply. You humans have something the Terry lack. We have studied your history, your wars, your struggles. When faced with impossible odds, you fight on. When defeat is mathematically certain, you refuse to accept it. You create solutions no logical mind would consider. He gestured toward the window, where Earth was visible in the distance. Your species went from simple flight to walking on your moon in 66 years. You've survived plagues, world wars, climate disasters. You are adaptable in ways the Terry are not. General Ta Wan-Li, head of Earth's Unified Military Command, spoke up. You want us to fight your war. I want you to help us think differently, Run replied. The Void Eaters are approaching our homeworld. We have perhaps 1 Earth year before they arrive. After that, they will undoubtedly find Earth as well. The implications hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about helping the Terry, it was about humanity's survival too. After the meeting, Jin-Ho found himself in a smaller room with President Han, General Li, Dr. Subin, and a few other high-ranking officials. Do you believe them? President Han asked Dr. Subin. The xenobiologist nodded. I've examined their ship, their technology. It's real. And the data they've provided about these Void Eaters matches with some anomalies our deep space telescopes have detected in recent years. It could be a trick, General Li said, his face stern. A way to get us to lower our defenses. Jin-Ho shook his head. With respect, General, if they wanted to attack us, they wouldn't need tricks. I saw their weapon systems. They could have taken out our entire defense grid before we knew they were here. President Han sighed. So what do we do? Send our people to fight an enemy that an advanced civilization couldn't beat. I think we should send a delegation to their homeworld, Jin-Ho suggested. A small team to assess the situation firsthand. Scientists, military strategists, engineers. If what the ambassador says is true, maybe we can help. And if not, at least we'll know what we're dealing with. After much debate, the council agreed. Jin-Ho would lead the mission, with Dr. Subin and a hand-picked team of experts. They would depart in 2 days. Jin-Ho spent the night at his apartment, possibly for the last time. He looked at the photo of his parents on the wall and wondered what they would think of their son being the first human to travel to an alien world. His phone rang. It was Mai-Ho Song, a tactical specialist he had requested for the mission. Captain, have you seen the news? She asked without greeting. Jin-Ho turned on his television. Despite government efforts to keep the alien arrival secret, someone had leaked the story. The screen showed crowds gathering in major cities around the world. Some people carried signs welcoming the aliens. Others held signs warning of the end times. It was bound to get out, Jin-Ho said. How are people taking it? About as well as expected. Some are scared. Some are excited. Religious leaders are giving special sermons. Scientists are demanding access to the Terry ship. Jin-Ho watched as the camera showed a group of protesters outside the coalition headquarters. Get some rest, Sergeant, he told Mai-Ho. Tomorrow's going to be busy. The next day was filled with preparations. Jin-Ho reviewed the files of each team member. Besides Dr. Subin and Sergeant Mai-Ho, there was Jun Seo, a young engineer specializing in outdated technology. Professor Du Yun, an expert in theoretical physics, and 5 others, each chosen for their unique skills and adaptable thinking. Ambassador Ruan had provided data modules about the Terry homeworld so the humans could prepare. Jin-Ho spent hours studying their culture, biology, and the history of their war with the Void Eaters. By evening, a crowd of thousands had gathered outside the spaceport. Jin-Ho watched them from a window as security forces kept them behind barriers. Are you scared? A voice asked. Jin-Ho turned to see Dr. Subin standing in the doorway. Terrified. he admitted, but also excited. Humans have dreamed of meeting aliens for centuries. I just never thought they'd need our help. Suvin smiled slightly. The ambassador explained more about their biology to me today. The Terry evolved from hive creatures. They're brilliant at executing plans as a group, but individual creativity isn't their strong point. Their brains are literally wired differently than ours. So they need our chaos, Jin-Ho said. Exactly. To them, our unpredictability is our greatest strength. The day of departure arrived. The team gathered at the spaceport, each carrying only essential items. The Terry shuttle that would take them to the main ship was smaller than Jin-Ho expected, with seats that had to be adjusted to fit human bodies. As they boarded, Ambassador Rion approached Jin-Ho. "Captain, before we leave, I must tell you something. The situation on our homeworld is worse than I explained to your leaders. The Void Eaters have accelerated their advance. We may have less time than we thought." Jin-Ho felt a chill run down his spine. "Why didn't you tell them?" "Because I feared they would refuse to help if they knew the full danger. But you deserve to know the truth before we depart." Jin-Ho looked back at Earth through the shuttle window. Blue, beautiful, and still blissfully unaware of the true threat coming its way. "We'll help you," Jin-Ho said firmly. "Not just for your people, but for ours too." As the shuttle doors closed, Jin-Ho couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet, and that their return to Earth was far from guaranteed. The journey to the stars had begun. The Terry ship moved through space unlike anything Jin-Ho had ever seen. There were no vibrations, no sense of movement. Stars streaked past the viewing ports as if they were flying through a tunnel of light. "We are entering what you might call a fold in space," Ambassador Ruan explained to the human team gathered in the ship's central chamber. "The journey to our homeworld should take moments." "Should?" Jin-Ho asked, noticing the odd choice of words. Ruan's 4 hands made a gesture that Jin-Ho had learned meant uncertainty. "Recent difficulties have affected our travel technology." Dr. Subin looked up from her datapad. "Your ships are damaged," she said. It wasn't a question. The ambassador's eyes blinked sideways. "Yes, the Void Eaters drain energy from everything they touch. Each encounter leaves our systems weaker." Jin-Ho exchanged glances with Mai-Ho, who stood guard near the door. This was new information, and not encouraging. "How long will the journey actually take?" Jin-Ho asked. 3 of your Earth days," Run replied. "I apologize for the delay." On the 2nd day of travel, Jin-Ho woke to an alarm. Red lights flashed through the corridors as he rushed to the bridge. The other humans were already there, looking out the main viewport. In the distance, a dark patch hummed against the stars. It wasn't black, exactly. It was the absence of anything, a tear in reality itself. "Void Eater," Rune said, his voice tight. "A scout. It shouldn't have detected us." Jin-Ho watched as the ship's weapons powered up. Beams of blue energy shot toward the dark patch. For a moment, the Void Eater seemed to shrink, but then it expanded again, moving toward them. "Changing course," announced the Terry pilot. "Standard evasion pattern." Jin-Ho noticed something strange. "Your evasion is following a regular pattern. It's predictable. It is the most efficient course," the pilot responded. Mai-Ho stepped forward. "Efficiency doesn't matter if it's predictable. The Void Eater is anticipating your movements." Sure enough, the dark patch was cutting across space, heading to where the ship would be rather than where it was. "Let me try something," Mai-Ho said, moving to the control panel. The Terry hesitated, but Ambassador Rion nodded. "Allow her." Mai-Ho took the controls and immediately sent the ship into a wild spin, then cut engines completely, drifting for several seconds before blasting forward at an angle. The maneuver made no logical sense. It wasted energy and time. But it worked. The Void Eater missed them by a wide margin. "Resume standard travel," Mai-Ho said, returning control to the stunned Terry pilot. Jin-Ho noticed the ambassador studying Mai-Ho with great interest. "Your tactics are unusual," Rune said. Mai-Ho shrugged. "Sometimes you have to be unpredictable to survive." They reached Terry Prime on the third day. From orbit, the planet looked beautiful, a world of blue oceans and silver continents. But as their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Jin-Ho saw that things were not well. The great cities, built of crystal and metal, were dimmed. Many towers stood dark. Defense platforms orbited the planet, but several were clearly damaged, parts removed for use elsewhere. "Power conservation," Jum-Seo said quietly, looking out at the darkened city as they landed. "They're shutting down non-essential systems." Ambassador Ruan led them from the landing pad to a large building at the center of the capital city. Inside, more Terry waited, their silver-blue skin reflecting the low lighting. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, with markings on his chest that suggested rank. "I am Commander Dune," he said through a translation device. "Welcome to Terry Prime. I wish your visit came in better times." The meeting room they entered had a large table with displays built into its surface. Images of battles flickered across them. Terry ships fighting against the dark patches that were Void Eaters. "We have lost 60% of our fleet," Dune explained. "Each battle costs us ships we cannot replace quickly enough. The Void Eaters learn from every encounter, adapting to our weapons and tactics." "How do they communicate?" Dr. Subin asked. "Do they share information like a hive mind?" "We believe they use quantum entanglement," replied a Terry scientist named Lan. "They can instantly share knowledge across vast distances." General Ta-1, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Show us your combat simulator. I want to see how your forces respond to Void Eater attacks." The Terry led them to another room with a large circular platform. When activated, it created a three-dimensional battlefield in miniature. Tiny ships moved through the projection, engaging with the dark forms of Void Eaters. Mai-Ho stepped onto the platform. "May I?" Commander Dune nodded, handing her a control rod. Mai-Ho took it and began to direct the simulated Terry forces. Instead of the orderly formations the Terry used, she scattered them, had them attack from multiple angles, sometimes even having ships collide with each other to change direction unexpectedly. The simulation showed a much higher survival rate for her forces. "Interesting," Dune said. "But such chaos would be difficult for our pilots to execute. We are trained to follow optimal patterns." Jin-Ho began to understand. "That's your weakness, isn't it? You can't adapt quickly enough because your thinking is too orderly." The room fell silent as the Terry looked at each other. "Yes," Ambassador Rion finally admitted. "The Terry mind seeks patterns and optimization. It is how we built our civilization. But the Void Eaters exploit this trait. They feed on predictability." Dr. Subin spent the next day examining Terry biology. The aliens allowed her to scan their brain structures and nervous systems. What she discovered confirmed Jin-Ho's suspicion. "Their neural pathways are different from ours," she explained to the human team that evening in their quarters. "They're optimized for perfect execution of established procedures, but they struggle with improvisation. Their brains literally work against them when they try to be random. That's why they need us," Jin-Ho said. "We're unpredictable by nature." Jum-Seo, who had been quiet for most of the trip, suddenly spoke up. "I've been studying the data on Void Eater encounters. There's something odd about their behavior." He pulled up a display showing energy readings from various battles. "Look here," he pointed. "The Void Eaters avoid certain frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum, frequencies that Terry technology doesn't use anymore." "What kind of frequencies?" asked Professor Du Yun. "Old ones. Radio waves, microwave radiation, even some forms of nuclear energy. The kind of technology Earth used in the 20th and early 21st centuries." Jin-Ho leaned forward. "Are you saying these advanced beings that can tear apart space itself are vulnerable to outdated technology. Jun-seo nodded. I think they might be. The Terry evolved beyond these technologies centuries ago. Their systems are all based on quantum fields and artificial gravity now. But the Void Eaters never learned to defend against the primitive stuff. Miho laughed. So the most advanced enemy in the galaxy might be defeated by a radio. It's worth investigating, Jin-ho said. Let's talk to the Terry scientists tomorrow. The next morning, they presented their theory to Ambassador Ryun and Commander Dune. The Terry leaders seemed skeptical. Primitive technology, Dune asked. We abandoned such methods because they were inefficient. Exactly, Jin-ho said. The Void Eaters have adapted to your advanced systems, but they've never encountered our inefficient technology. They wouldn't know how to defend against it. To test the theory, Jun-seo requested access to the Terry archives. He found designs for early Terry communication systems that used radio waves. With help from the Terry engineers, they built a simple transmitter. During the next Void Eater approach to the outer defense perimeter, they activated the transmitter. The effect was immediate. The Void Eater changed course, moving away from the radio waves as if repelled. It works, Jun-seo exclaimed. They don't like the old frequencies. Jin-ho turned to Ambassador Ryun. We need to send a message to Earth. We need them to send us everything they can. Diesel generators, vacuum tubes, even mechanical clocks. Anything that doesn't use advanced energy systems. The ambassador's eyes widened. You want to fight the most advanced threat we've ever faced, with outdated technology. Sometimes, Jin-ho said with a smile, moving backward is the only way forward. The plan was met with resistance from some Terry officials. The idea of using primitive technology seemed illogical to their ordered minds, but the evidence was clear. The Void Eaters were vulnerable to these old frequencies and methods. Your people built your civilization by always moving forward, Jin-ho explained to the Terry High Council. You abandoned old technologies when better ones came along. That makes sense, but it also means the Void Eaters have never needed to adapt to those old methods. Think of it like biological warfare, Dr. Subin added. On Earth, indigenous populations were sometimes devastated by common diseases that foreigners had built immunity to over generations. The Void Eaters have immunity to your advanced weapons, but not to our primitive ones. Slowly, the council was convinced. They authorized Jin-ho to send a detailed request to Earth. Within days, Earth's governments began gathering the requested materials and loading them onto transport rockets. Meanwhile, Jun-seo and a team of Terry engineers began designing hybrid weapons. Advanced Terry delivery systems carrying Earth's primitive payloads. Miho worked with Terry pilots to teach them unpredictable flight patterns. One evening, as Jin-ho watched the first transport ships from Earth arrive in orbit, Ambassador Ryun joined him at the viewing window. Your people responded quickly, the ambassador noted. Jin-ho nodded. We understand what's at stake. If the Void Eaters destroy your civilization, ours will be next. There is something I have been wondering, Ryun said. How do humans manage to be so chaotic? Does it not cause problems for your society? Jin-ho smiled. Oh, it definitely does. We fight wars over differences that must seem trivial to you. We waste resources, make mistakes, follow flawed leaders. But that same chaos gives us strength. When one approach fails, we try something completely different. When we can't go over an obstacle, we go around it, or under it, or we change the obstacle itself. Ryun's four hands made a gesture of understanding. Chaos as adaptation, a concept difficult for Terry to grasp. But you're learning, Jin-ho said. And we're learning from you too. Maybe together, we can find a balance that will defeat the Void Eaters. As they spoke, alarms began to sound throughout the city. Commander Dune's voice came over the communication system. A Void Eater squadron has breached the outer defenses. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Jin-ho and Ryun looked at each other, The moment to test their theories had arrived sooner than expected. "Let's see if chaos can beat the void," Jin-Ho said grimly. "Everyone to the command center," Jin-Ho shouted as he ran through the corridors with Ambassador Rian. The alarms continued to blare throughout the Terry city. They'd reached the command center to find it filled with Terry officers moving in perfect coordination. Screens showed the approaching Void Eater squadron, 5 dark patches moving through space toward the planet. "Status report," Commander Dune demanded. 5 Void Eaters have passed the outer defense ring," a Terry officer reported. "They destroyed 3 satellite platforms. Estimated arrival at inner defenses in 20 minutes. Jin-Ho looked at Mai-Ho. "We need to test our theory now. Is any of the Earth technology ready?" Mai-Ho nodded. "The first shipment arrived yesterday. Jum-Seo and the Terry engineers have already modified a small scout ship." "Then let's use it," Jin-Ho said. Commander Dune turned to them. "The modifications are untested. To send a ship against 5 Void Eaters would be suicide. We don't need to defeat all 5, Jin-Ho explained. "We just need to prove our theory works. One successful hit will give us the data we need." After a brief discussion, Dune agreed. Mai-Ho volunteered to pilot the modified ship. "I'll go with her," Jun-Seo said, surprising everyone. The young engineer was not trained for combat. "Someone needs to operate the new systems. I understand them best." Jin-Ho wanted to object, but knew Jun-Seo was right. "Be careful, both of you." The modified scout ship looked strange. Its sleek Terry design was now marred by bulky attachments, old radio antennas, a small diesel generator, and a payload of what looked like scrap metal. Mai-Ho settled into the pilot's seat while Jun-Seo checked the new systems. "The ship will still use Terry engines for propulsion," Jun-Seo explained as they prepared for launch. "But once we get close to the Void Eaters, we'll switch to the diesel generator for all other systems. The radio transmitter will be broadcasting on frequencies the Void Eaters seem to avoid." "And the payload?" Mai-Ho asked. "A simple nuclear device surrounded by copper shrapnel. Nuclear fission is something the Terry abandoned centuries ago in favor of cleaner energy. The Void Eaters have never encountered it." The launch bay doors opened, and Mai-Ho guided the ship out into space. From the command center, Jin-Ho, Dr. Subin, and the others watched on the main screen. "They're approaching the Void Eater formation," a Terry officer announced. On screen, they saw the scout ship racing toward the dark patches that were the Void Eaters. The creatures seemed to notice the approaching vessel and moved to intercept it. "Now, Jun-Seo," Mai-Ho's voice came over the comm. Switching to Earth tech, the scout ship's energy signature suddenly changed. The blue glow of its Terry engines dimmed, replaced by the crude power of the diesel generator. Smoke actually trailed from the ship, something unheard of in modern space travel. The effect on the Void Eaters was immediate. They hesitated, their formation breaking as if confused. "They don't know what to make of us," Mai-Ho reported. "They can't lock onto our energy signature." Jin-Ho held his breath as the scout ship flew directly toward the nearest Void Eater. The dark patch seemed to ripple, trying to move away from the approaching vessel. "Launching payload," Jun-Seo announced. A small object shot from the scout ship, heading straight for the Void Eater. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a brilliant flash lit up space. The nuclear device had detonated, sending copper shrapnel through the Void Eater's field. On the command center screens, they saw the dark patch distort, twist, and then collapse in on itself. The room fell silent. Then Dr. Subin whispered what everyone was thinking. It worked. The remaining Void Eaters immediately retreated, moving away from the planet at high speed. "Get that ship back here," Jin-Ho ordered. "We have work to do." Over the next week, ships from Earth arrived carrying mountains of outdated technology. Diesel engines, vacuum tubes, analog devices, even mechanical watches. The Terry engineers were fascinated by these simple machines. "Your technology is so physical," One Terry engineer told Jinho as they unloaded crates of old military radio equipment. Ours relies on energy fields and quantum states. There's something elegant about the directness of your machines. Teams of humans and Terry worked day and night to modify the alien fleet. Where energy shields had once protected ships, they now added physical barriers of lead and copper. Energy weapons were replaced with rail guns firing solid projectiles. In the command center, Jinho and General Taiwan worked with Commander Dune on a new strategy. The Void Eaters communicate through quantum entanglement, Jinho explained, pointing to a diagram. They share information instantly. That's how they adapt so quickly. But quantum entanglement can be disrupted, Dr. Subin added. Earth's early digital age produced enormous amounts of random electronic noise. We can use that to interfere with their communication. Like jamming their signals, General Taiwan said. Exactly. We've prepared thousands of small transmitters that will broadcast everything from pop music to emergency broadcast tones. The random signals should disrupt their ability to coordinate attacks. Commander Dune looked skeptical. Such disorder in battle goes against all Terry military doctrine. That's exactly why it will work, Jinho said. The Void Eaters have adapted to your ordered tactics. They won't know how to respond to chaos. 3 days later, their long-range sensors detected a large Void Eater fleet approaching. This was not a scouting party. It was the main attack force. Jinho stood on the bridge of the Terry flagship, now modified with Earth technology. Around them, hundreds of hybrid ships prepared for battle. Each was a strange mix of advanced alien design and crude human innovation. The Void Eaters will enter weapons range in 5 minutes, a Terry officer announced. Jinho looked at Ambassador Ryun, who stood nearby. Are your pilots ready? The ambassador nodded. They have trained with Sergeant Mayo. The maneuvers feel unnatural to them, but they understand the necessity. Deploy the transmitters, Jinho ordered. Small drones launched from the Terry ships, spreading out to form a wide net around the approaching Void Eater fleet. Once in position, they activated. Immediately, the space around the Void Eaters filled with electromagnetic noise, old Earth radio stations, TV broadcasts, military communications, emergency signals, all blasting at once on frequencies the advanced aliens had long ago abandoned. On the view screen, Jinho saw the Void Eater formation falter. The dark patches began to move erratically, some colliding with others. They're confused, Maiho said from her position at the tactical station. They can't coordinate. All ships, commence attack, Commander Dune ordered. Follow the human pattern. The Terry fleet moved forward, but not in their usual precise formations. Instead, they flew in seemingly random patterns, accelerating and decelerating unpredictably. Railguns fired solid metal projectiles. Old-style nuclear missiles streaked toward their targets. The first wave of attacks hit the Void Eaters hard. Several of the dark patches collapsed immediately, unable to adapt to the primitive weapons. Others tried to retreat but found their path blocked by more transmitters broadcasting disruptive signals. It's working, Jun Seo shouted, watching the battle from his station. They can't coordinate to defend themselves. For the first time in their long war, the Terry were winning decisively against the Void Eaters. Ship after ship reported successful kills as the seemingly unstoppable enemy fell before human ingenuity and Terry precision. As the battle continued, Jinho noticed Ambassador Ryun, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your chaos is your strength, the ambassador said quietly. We would never have conceived of such disorder, yet it is saving us. Jinho smiled. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. The battle lasted for hours. By the end, over half the Void Eater fleet had been destroyed. The rest retreated, moving away from Terry Prime at high speed. The command center erupted in cheers, both Terry and human. They had won a significant victory. But Jinho's celebrations were cut short when Jun Seo approached with a worried look. Captain, we have a problem, the young engineer said. I've been analyzing the data from the battle. The Void Eaters that escaped, they're adapting. He showed Jin Ho a display of energy readings from the retreating enemies. See these patterns? They're starting to emit frequencies that match our transmitters. They're developing countermeasures. Jin Ho's heart sank. How long before they neutralize our advantage? Jun Seo shook his head. Days, maybe weeks. They're evolving faster than we anticipated. The victory celebration turned into an emergency planning session. Despite their success, time was running out. If they adapt to our current methods, we'll need something even more unpredictable. Jin Ho told the gathered leaders of both species, "What could be more unpredictable than what we've already done?" Commander Dune asked. Dr. Subin, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, suddenly spoke up. "We need to understand what the Void Eaters actually feed on. We've been assuming they consume energy, but what if it's something else?" She pulled up data from the recent battle. "Look at this. When our transmitters broadcast random signals, the Void Eaters became disoriented. Why? Because they couldn't predict the signals," Maiho suggested. "Exactly," Dr. Subin said. "What if they don't just feed on energy, but on predictability itself, on patterns and order?" The room fell silent as everyone considered this idea. "If that's true," Jin Ho said slowly, "then chaos isn't just a tactic against them. It's poison to them." "We need to test this theory," Ambassador Ruan said. "If the doctor is right, we may need to rethink our entire approach." Jin Ho nodded. "We captured fragments from the destroyed Void Eaters. Let's study them more closely. Meanwhile, we should prepare for the next attack. They'll come back, and they'll be stronger." "What do you propose?" General Taiwan asked. Jin Ho looked around the room. "If chaos hurts them, we need more of it. I want to request something unusual from Earth." "More weapons?" Commander Dune asked. "No," Jin Ho replied. "People. I want artists, musicians, gamblers. People whose thinking can't be predicted by any algorithm." The Terry leaders looked confused, but Ambassador Ruan nodded slowly. "I understand. You want to increase the unpredictability factor." "Exactly," Jin Ho said. "The Void Eaters adapt to patterns, so we'll give them no patterns to adapt to." As the meeting ended, Jin Ho looked out at the stars. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The next phase would require even more creativity, more chaos, more humanity, and time was running out. The Void Eaters regrouped at the edge of the Terry system. Long-range sensors showed them gathering in greater numbers than before. Analysis of their movements revealed disturbing changes. "They're developing shields that can block our radio frequencies," Jun Seo explained during the morning briefing. "And they're starting to ignore our unpredictable flight patterns. They're adapting faster than we anticipated." Jin Ho studied the data with a growing sense of dread. The Human-Terry alliance had weeks, perhaps days, before their advantage disappeared completely. "What about Dr. Subin's theory?" he asked. "Have we learned anything new from the Void Eater fragments?" Dr. Subin stepped forward. "Yes, and it confirms my suspicions. The Void Eaters don't just feed on energy. They feed on order and pattern. Their whole biology is designed to absorb and process predictable systems." She displayed an image of the microscopic structure of a Void Eater fragment. "See these formations? They're like digestive systems, but instead of breaking down food, they break down patterns, mathematical sequences, ordered energy emissions, even the regular orbit of planets. So chaos really is toxic to them," Maiho said. "Not just toxic, fatal. But the problem is, they're learning to predict even our chaos. They're finding patterns in our unpredictability." Jin Ho stood up, his decision made. "Then we need more chaos. True, deep chaos that can't be predicted even by us." Jin Ho's request to Earth raised eyebrows among world leaders, but they complied. Within days, transport ships arrived carrying hundreds of volunteers, not scientists or soldiers, but artists, musicians, gamblers, children, and even a few people diagnosed with certain thought disorders that made their thinking particularly nonlinear. Commander Dune watched with confusion as these civilians filed into the Terry military headquarters. "I do not understand," he told Jinho. "How will these people help fight the Void Eaters?" "By thinking in ways neither you nor I can predict," Jinho explained. "Each human mind is unique, but some are more unique than others. These people specialize in creativity, randomness, and unexpected connections." The new arrivals quickly set to work. Musicians began composing pieces with no recognizable patterns. Artists created visuals designed to confuse even human perception. Professional gamblers were put in charge of tactical decisions, making choices based on gut feeling rather than logic. Most surprising to the Terry was Jinho's use of children in planning sessions. "Why do you ask the young ones for input?" Ambassador Ruan asked as they watched a group of 8-year-olds drawing battle plans. "Because children haven't fully internalized the rules and patterns adults take for granted," Jinho explained. "They make connections we would never consider. Their ideas are often impossible, but sometimes they're brilliant in ways we couldn't imagine." The final battle plan that emerged was like nothing the Terry had ever considered. Ships would change tactics every few minutes based on dice rolls. Fleet formations would be determined by card draws. Musicians would compose disruptive frequencies based on improvisational jazz. Artists would design camouflage patterns that confused visual processing. When Jinho presented this plan to the Terry High Council, many members objected. "This is madness," one counselor said. "There is no logic to this approach." "Exactly," Jinho replied. "Logic is what the Void Eaters expect. They've already begun adapting to our previous methods. The only way to stay ahead is to become truly unpredictable, even to ourselves." The debate continued for hours until Ambassador Ruan finally spoke. "I have watched the humans since they arrived," he said. "Their methods seem chaotic, even foolish at times, yet they have achieved more against the Void Eaters in weeks than we have in decades. I believe we must trust them now, even if their plan defies our understanding." Reluctantly, the council agreed. As the final preparations were made, Dr. Subin and Jun Seo worked day and night analyzing the captured Void Eater fragments. They made a breakthrough just 3 days before the expected attack. "I need to see Captain Jinho immediately," Dr. Subin told the guard outside her lab. Her voice was urgent, her eyes wide with excitement. Jinho arrived quickly, followed by Ambassador Ruan and Commander Dune. "We figured it out," Dr. Subin said, gesturing to the holographic display. "The Void Eaters don't just feed on predictability. They're made of it. Their entire structure is built from ordered patterns." "What does that mean for us?" Jinho asked. Jun Seo stepped forward. "It means we can do more than just confuse them. We can poison them. If we transmit enough truly random information directly into their communication network, it could disrupt their very structure." "Like a virus," Dr. Subin added. "But instead of attacking cells, it attacks patterns." Jinho's mind raced with the possibilities. How do we deliver this chaos virus? "We'll need to get close enough to their central communication node," Jun Seo said. "Then upload a massive amount of truly random data into their network." "And where do we get this random data?" Commander Dune asked. Jinho smiled. "From the most chaotic source in the universe, the human mind." The plan came together quickly. A special transmission device was built, capable of interfacing with the Void Eater's quantum communication network. Then came the harder part, generating truly random content. Thousands of human volunteers contributed. Poets wrote verses that defied conventional structure. Musicians composed pieces that broke every rule of harmony. Children drew pictures and told stories that followed no logical progression. Mathematicians created number sequences with no pattern. All of this was compiled into what Jinho called the chaos payload, a massive data stream of pure unpredictability. The final element came from an unexpected source, an elderly woman named Hey-sun, who had come with the Earth volunteers, approached Jin-Ho the night before the battle. "I have something to add to your collection," she said, handing him a small data drive. "What is it?" Jin-Ho asked. "My memories," Hassan replied. "Every random thought, every dream, every emotion I've experienced in 83 years of life. Nothing is more chaotic than a single human consciousness." Jin-Ho added her contribution to the payload. By morning, they were ready. The Void Eater fleet entered the Terry system at dawn. There were hundreds of them now, their dark forms rippling across space like tears in reality itself. Jin-Ho stood on the bridge of the flagship, now commanded by a professional poker player who had won multiple world championships. The tactical officer was a jazz musician. The weapons systems were controlled by a team that included a child prodigy and an art therapist. "This is the strangest battle formation I've ever seen," Maiho said, looking at the deployment of their fleet. She wasn't wrong. The ships were arranged not in tactical patterns but in configurations suggested by the children, some shaped like animals, others in zigzags that made no strategic sense. "The Void Eaters are scanning us," a Terry officer reported. "They appear confused." On the main screen, Jin-Ho could see the dark patches hesitating, their movement less coordinated than before. "They're trying to find the pattern," he said. "Launch Phase 1. The first wave of ships moved forward, each following a flight path determined by rolls of dice just moments before launch. Some flew in spirals, others in jagged lines. Some even deliberately misfired weapons to create unpredictable energy signatures. The Void Eaters responded, but slowly. Their usual coordinated attacks were disjointed as they struggled to predict the humans' chaotic tactics. "Phase 2, Jin-Ho ordered. Thousands of small transmitters deployed, broadcasting the works of the musicians and artists, sounds and images with no pattern, constantly changing. On screen, the Void Eater formation began to break apart. Some of the dark patches collided with each other, others seemed to shrink. "It's working," Ambassador Ruan said, his voice filled with wonder. "They cannot adapt to this level of chaos." "Now for the final phase," Jin-Ho said. "Launch the delivery team." A small, heavily modified ship detached from the flagship. Miho was at the controls, with Jun-Seo operating the special transmitter. Their mission was to get close enough to the largest Void Eater, the one they believed contained the central communication node, and upload the Chaos payload. Jin-Ho watched as their ship weaved through the battle, following a path no computer would ever calculate. The Void Eaters seemed unable to track it, their attempts to intercept always one step behind Maiho's unpredictable maneuvers. "We're approaching the target," Maiho's voice came over the comm. "Preparing to transmit." The small ship moved to within a few kilometers of the massive Void Eater at the center of the enemy fleet. Jun-Seo activated the transmitter, sending the Chaos payload, the combined creative output of thousands of human minds, directly into the Void Eater's communication network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the large Void Eater began to pulse, its dark form expanding and contracting rapidly. The pulses spread to the surrounding Void Eaters, then to the entire fleet. "Get out of there now," Jin-Ho shouted into the comm. Maiho's ship turned and accelerated away from the Void Eater fleet. Behind them, the dark patches were no longer coordinating at all. Some began to collapse in on themselves, while others fragmented into smaller pieces that quickly dissolved. "They're dissolving," Commander Dune said in disbelief. "The entire fleet." Within minutes, where hundreds of Void Eaters had been, there was nothing but empty space. The enemy hadn't retreated. They had been destroyed, their very structure torn apart by the chaos they couldn't process. As Maiho's ship returned to the flagship, cheers erupted throughout the fleet. Human and Terry voices united in celebration. 1 week later, Jin-Ho stood with Ambassador Rion in the Great Hall of the Terry capital. The city's lights were bright again, power fully restored now that the Void Eater threat was gone. "Our scientists have confirmed it," Rune said. The remaining Void Eaters throughout our territory have all collapsed. The Chaos virus spread through their communication network, affecting even those far from the battle. It wasn't just the virus, Jinho said. It was teaching your people to embrace unpredictability, to see disorder not as a flaw, but as a strength. Rion nodded. A lesson we will not forget. The Terri have already begun incorporating human-inspired randomness into our systems and training. The ambassador led Jinho to a small pedestal. On it rested a crystal that glowed with blue-white light. This is our gift to Earth, Rion explained. It contains the complete knowledge and history of the Terri civilization. Technology, art, philosophy, everything we have learned in 10,000 years. Jinho stared at the crystal in awe. This is incredibly generous. It is only fair, Rion replied. We have given you technology, but you have given us something far more valuable. A new way of thinking. The ability to embrace uncertainty. As Jinho reached for the crystal, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. Humanity had been searching the stars for advanced civilizations, hoping to learn from them. Instead, they had found that humanity's seeming weaknesses, their irrationality, their disorder, their endless capacity for the unexpected, were actually their greatest strengths. The alliance with the Terri marked a new chapter in human history, not as students of the stars, but as teachers. We will not be strangers again, Ambassador Rion said, placing all four of his hands on Jinho's shoulders in the Terri gesture of deep respect. Your chaos has saved our order. Together, we will build something greater than either could achieve alone. Jinho nodded, holding the crystal that would change Earth forever. Chaos and order. It turns out we needed each other all along. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Jinho looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other civilizations were facing their own challenges. Perhaps they too would discover that the answer to their problems wasn't more advanced technology or more perfect order, but the beautiful unpredictability that made humans human.